What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to show you how I updated this flame mahogany buffet to give it a nice new modern look while still preserving those classic details. Stay tuned. I picked up this piece from Facebook Marketplace for $100. The silhouette of it with its curves really caught my eye, as well as the flame mahogany veneer, which I think is really beautiful. But it's just with the color and the glossiness, to me, it's a bit outdated. So my goal here is to tone down the color and select a finish that has a less glossy sheen. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be reusing this hardware, so I'm just taking it off, keeping the screws screwed into the back of each piece, and collecting everything into a box so that I can keep that for later. And next, I'm going to be using these long breakable screws put backwards through the hardware holes with a piece of tape to keep them in place. And that way I can use them as handles while I refinish. So I'm going to use this magnet to make sure that first it works, and it does. And if it does not attract to the handle, that means that it's most likely brass. And as you can see, the magnet has no effect, so it's brass. Next step is to give the whole piece a nice clean with some sympathing. I can already tell that this finish is very thick and tough, so I'm going to come in with my chemical stripper before I sand just to give myself a head start there. And so I'm going to apply it generously, let it sit for a few minutes, and then use a scraper to remove it. Here you can see how thick this finish is, which is excellent for removing because it's not super runny and messy. The stripper and get all the rest of the residue off. I'm going to apply some lacquer thinner, and with some steel wool I'm going to just scrub that and then wipe it clean with paper towels. Next, I'll give the surface a final clean with mineral spirits to get any remaining residue off in prep for sanding. All of these steps will set me up for a quick and easy job of sanding with minimal use of sandpaper. So the one major repair that I do have to address is this missing trim. I'm gonna go ahead and use the opposite side and make a mold so that I can use Bondo and create some trim to put on the other side. So for molding, I'm using the silicone putty. It comes in two parts, A and B. One is blue, one is white, and you will just get equal portions from each can to mix together. You don't have to be super exact. I kind of just eyeballed it and it worked out pretty well. So once you get your pieces, you will mix them together until it's a nice uniform color. And at that point, I think you have like 20 minutes or so to work with it before it starts to harden. So the instructions say to first put a very thin layer over the part that you're making a mold of. I think this just allows you to really make sure that you're getting all of the details. And then after you have a nice thin layer, then you'll come back with some more to build up sort of a thicker mold. And then you'll just let it sit for the 20 minutes and then you can remove it. So after the time was up, I am taking it off. So it's kind of stuck a little bit, but it comes off pretty easily. And it's not, super hard, but it's firm, and it will allow you to fill it with whatever shaping medium that you want. And like I said, in this case, I'm going to use Bondo. So here's the good old Bondo. So it's a two-part epoxy wood filler. You'll just portion out however much you want to use, and then if you can see through my arm, you'll just add a little bit of the cream hardener and mix that up until it's a uniform color. And then I am going to use this to fill the mold that I made from the missing trim and let this sit probably overnight just to make sure that it is nice and solid. The top has had a good amount of time to dry, and so now I'm coming in with 120 grit sandpaper to do my first sand, and then I'll come back with a 180 grit to refine the scratch pattern and make sure everything is nice and prepped for the next steps. Before moving on to the 180, I am going to use this towel, which is very, very slightly damp with mineral spirits, just to remove the dust. This will help keep the sanding easy and fast, and also reduce the risk of any sanding swirls. I went ahead and let this Bondo dry overnight, so the next day I am unmolding and hopefully it doesn't break apart. and I think we're doing good. So I'm just breaking off those little pieces around the edge and kind of checking it out. It's a couple very shallow bubbles, but I'm gonna sand this a little bit once I get it on anyway, so should be all right. So just to make the join a little easier, I'm gonna cut each side off at a nice square angle and then measure where to trim the mold that I made. And while I was trimming that, I noticed this was a bit loose, so I'm gonna just get some wood glue in here with a syringe and then clamp that to dry. Using the same process that I did on the top of the buffet, I'm gonna strip the doors and the drawers using chemical stripper. Then I'll scrape off all the finish and then come in with some lacquer thinner to get off any of the remaining finish and then clean everything up with mineral spirits before moving on to sanding. Switching gears back to the trim piece, I'm just making some adjustments with my knife here to make sure that it sits nice and flush against the side of the buffet. Next, I'm gonna place the trim in place and then measure where I need to trim to meet up with the edges. What? How did that happen? Oh my god. Okay. To deal with the trim piece on the doors and the curve, I'm going to come in with a couple of different hand sanding tools and a detail sander. And finally, just giving a nice wipe down with some mineral spirits to remove all the sanding dust. And for the drawers, they do have a curve, but it's a less extreme curve. So I am using a foam interface pad in between my sander and my sandpaper. And I'll do a sand with 120 grit and then come back with 180. After finishing with all the sanding on the drawers, I'm giving again a wipe down with some mineral spirits to remove the sanding dust and to get a nice look at this gorgeous veneer. And finally tackling the body of the dresser with some stripper, lacquer thinner, and the sander. For some of the areas where I couldn't get with the sander, I am using some sanding blocks and a sanding net disc to get into those areas and get all the final details. somehow I forgot to record gluing this trim on, but imagine that I applied wood glue and clamps and now it is nicely adhered. So I'm just filling in some of the gaps around the edges and where the pieces connect with some wood filler, and then I will let that set before sanding. And I'm just cleaning up the edges here with my utility knife to get a nice clean edge. In my last video, I used this Charleston green paint by Wise Owl as a paint wash to reduce the red in mahogany wood, and I really liked how that turned out on the top of that dresser. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing to this buffet. So I'm using 1 part paint to 3 parts water, and I'll just mix that up to a nice watery consistency and then apply it to the buffet. Here I'm starting with the drawers, and so I'll just apply this with a chip brush and then wipe it back with paper towels. So I want the top to be just a tad darker, so I'm going to use my leftover paint wash and add a little bit of this Van Dyke brown glaze to it, and then reapply with the same process of applying with the chip brush and then wiping back with the paper towel. Because some of the different parts of the dresser are made from different woods, the parts here around the drawers and the doors took the green a little bit literally, and so I am going to use this same glaze from General Finishes in Van Dyke Brown to go over that to help neutralize the green. For a finishing product, I've chosen this Natura One Coat wood oil. It's a 2-component system with a hardener So the instructions are 3 parts of the oil to 1 part of the hardener. You then mix that up really well and apply to the wood surface within 5 to 6 hours of preparing the mixture. I recently got these little plastic cups with a bunch of different measurements and ratios already printed on them, and they've been really awesome. So I'll link those below if you're interested. To help mitigate like loss of the oil with a paper towel or a cloth, I'm using this plastic spreader, which ended up working really well. It helps you conserve the product because you're not wasting any. You're literally spreading it across, and it's not absorbing into the spreader that you're using. So it really helps to stretch the product. This product is very similar to Rubio Monocoat, but it's much more affordable. I watched a video where they compared this oil with Rubio and a few other 2-component wood oils, and this one actually won best overall. It had best durability and the product stretched farthest, so that's kind of why I chose this particular one. And also I like the fact that it's only 1 coat. Supposedly it does not bond to itself, so if you add another coat and then buff it, you're just going to buff all of that extra coat off because it's not going to stick. And so the 1 coat is all you need, and it provides a nice low luster shine that will enhance the wood grain. So I wanted to try this out. I thought it would be perfect for this piece. Before finishing the top, I'm going to just knock down any of the grain that rose with high grit sandpaper and then clean away the dust with very light mineral spirits, and then move on with the oil. And coming back to the trim here, I am going to just give it a nice shape with some sandpaper before moving on to color correcting. For color correcting, I'm going to use a couple of different methods. I'm going to alternate between markers and paint washes and the brown glaze. It's never going to be perfect by any means, but it's better than missing. So I'm going to do my best to try and blend this in. To address the tarnished hardware, I'm going to boil it in a mixture of vinegar and water, and then after it is cool, I will use some Barkeeper's Friend and steel wool to scrub these and polish them up. I like to get the hardware a little bit wet before sprinkling with the Barkeeper's Friend. This kind of makes a paste with it and helps to use the abrasive qualities of the cleaner that really gets in there and gets the tarnish off. So as a comparison with an uncleaned one, it's not perfect, but it's much brighter than it was. Before the reveal, let's take a look back at where we started. So overall, not bad. Needed some repairs. The finish was a little crackling, so it needed to be redone. And overall, just a little bit too red for my liking. So here's the after. I'm pretty happy with the result. I love this flame mahogany grain. I think it looks so stunning. I do think some of the green is still kind of coming through on certain parts, so probably work on that. But in general, I love this less gloss look, and the hardware cleaned up looks so good against the grain. Here's my repair. Not perfect, but better than missing. I hope you like this makeover. Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you would have done something differently, I'd love to hear that too. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.